This video was brought to you by Skillshare. Since October 7th, Israel and Hezbollah have been engaged in a low-level and often overlooked conflict running parallel to the war in Gaza. However, in the past few days, tensions on the Israel-Lebanon border have escalated sharply. The prospect of an all-out war, potentially even spilling into the EU via Cyprus, is looking increasingly likely too. So in this video, we're going to explain what's been happening, why Israel may or may not launch an all-out war with Hezbollah, and what that war might look like. Before we get into it, we recently announced that we're launching a physical magazine that will feature major articles on things like all of the wars going on around the world right now, and the upcoming and hugely significant US election. So if you want to support our journalism, then consider learning more, or even buying a copy, by clicking the link in the description. First though, a quick primer on Hezbollah. In the early 1980s, amid the chaos of the Lebanese civil war, Hezbollah emerged in southern Lebanon, inspired and backed by Iran, and out of opposition to Israel's invasion and occupation. Eventually, after a persistent guerrilla campaign, Israel withdrew in 2000. But then, in 2006, the two sides fought a short but destructive 34-day war, in which Hezbollah fought Israel to a standstill, something that helped solidify its reputation as the region's premier anti-Israel movement. Hezbollah's arsenal has only grown since then, though, with it estimated to have upwards of 150,000 rockets, and being described as the world's most heavily armed non-state actor. As an influential political party, Hezbollah also effectively operates a state within a state in Lebanon, controlling much of the Shiite majority areas in southern and eastern Lebanon, including southern Beirut. Anyway, in the wake of Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, Hezbollah has launched rockets into Israel in what was effectively an act of solidarity with Hamas, although Hezbollah has insisted that it didn't have any forewarning about Hamas's plans. Since then, on a near-daily basis, Hezbollah and the Israeli military have been exchanging rocket, drone, and missile fire across the Israel-Lebanon border. Now, so far, this back and forth hasn't spilled into an all-out war, but that's not to say that it's been inconsequential. Far from it. At least 27 Israelis, 8 civilians and 19 soldiers have been killed by Hezbollah strikes, and more than 60,000 Israeli civilians have been displaced from northern Israel because of the conflict. At the same time, Israeli strikes in Lebanon have killed at least 87 civilians and almost 300 Hezbollah fighters, and more than 94,000 people in southern Lebanon have had to flee their homes. Attacks haven't just been limited to the immediate border area either. Hezbollah, for example, has expanded its strikes to include the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, and has also attacked targets as far south as Acre and Tiberias. Israel, meanwhile, has struck far deeper into Lebanon, hitting targets in Lebanon's east and north, and also carrying out a strike on a southern suburb of Beirut. And this conflict has been escalating further in recent weeks. An Israeli strike earlier this month killed the most senior Hezbollah commander so far, and in response, Hezbollah fired some 250 rockets at Israel in one day, its largest volley yet. Then, this week, Hezbollah published a near 10-minute video of drone surveillance footage of sites in northern Israel, including of residential neighborhoods in the city of Haifa, as well as sensitive areas like military installations and the city's port and airport. This prompted the Israeli foreign minister to suggest that the Israeli government would soon make a decision on opening up a significant new front against Hezbollah, writing that in an all-out war, Hezbollah will be destroyed and Lebanon will be severely hit. Later on, the Israeli military said that operational plans for an offensive in Lebanon were approved and validated. Hezbollah's leader responded by warning that Hezbollah would attack Cyprus if it allowed Israel to use its ports and bases, which is a possibility if the IDF deem Haifa too vulnerable. This would effectively expand the war to directly include the EU, and Hezbollah is presumably hoping that this will encourage the EU to put pressure on Israel to de-escalate. So, this is all understandably looking like Israel and Hezbollah might be on the brink of an all-out war that could spill into the EU. But why is that something that at least some in Israel are pushing for? Well, there are a few different long and short-term factors. With some 60,000 Israelis displaced from their homes in northern Israel because of the Hezbollah attacks, there's growing pressure on the Israeli government to find a resolution that will enable these people to return to their homes. While for Hezbollah, they say that they'll continue firing on Israel until there's a ceasefire in Gaza. Longer term, though, Israel wants its northern population to be able to live without the fear of the presence of Hezbollah across the border, with more radical elements in Israeli politics thus wanting to destroy Hezbollah entirely, or at least drive the group north of the Litani River, which was supposed to happen after the 2006 war, according to UN Resolution 1701. Beyond just the security factors, there are also domestic factors at play too. It's clear that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's political survival is linked to the continuation of the war in Gaza. That's because as long as the war continues, Netanyahu can bat away demands for new elections by appealing for unity and stability. However, with Israel signaling that its Rafah offensive is near completion, the war in Gaza could potentially shift to a less intensive phase. As such, opening up a new front against Hezbollah in Lebanon could be seen as an option by Netanyahu to prolong his political life. And unfortunately, despite the US leading efforts to prevent an all-out war with Hezbollah, the lesson of Gaza is that the US is basically unable to restrain Netanyahu. Nonetheless, this doesn't mean that a war is inevitable. Israel and Hezbollah are both aware of the potential destruction that could be caused by an all-out war, and there's a strong incentive to keep the current conflict within bounds per se. But even if we were to take the optimistic view that neither side wants escalation, that doesn't mean that it won't happen. As the US Special Envoy, who's been pushing for a diplomatic resolution, has said, as Israel and Hezbollah continue to exchange fire on a near daily basis, an accident or mistake could cause the situation to spiral out of control. It's worth concluding then by making clear just how destructive a war between the two could be, as Hezbollah is far better equipped and trained than Hamas is, and has the potential to overwhelm Israel's air defense systems and hit its major cities. Equally, Israel's defense minister has warned that if war breaks out, Israel would return Lebanon to the Stone Age. And an Israeli offensive similar or worse to the one in 2006 that killed more than 1,000 Lebanese would be devastating for a country that's already been wrecked by a multitude of crises for many years now. A week or so ago, we announced that we're working on a physical magazine which dives deep into the upcoming UK general election. But it turns out that designing a magazine isn't all that easy. So I headed to Skillshare to take a look through some of their design courses, including the incredibly helpful course, How to Design a Magazine and Learn InDesign, which helped me to, do both things. This means that unlike when I tried to learn InDesign for another, never-released project a few years ago, I was guided through the process quickly and efficiently. And this time, the project will actually see the light of day, thanks to Skillshare's incredibly easy-to-follow guides. It's not just that either. You likely already know that Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, and more. But Skillshare can also help take your career or side hustle to the next level, with hundreds of career-focused classes too. That's courses on everything from how to start a business to maximizing your workflow, or even how to grow in e-commerce, another course that I used when building the website that sells the magazine. And the best news is that the first 500 people to use the link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today.